Okay, in this video, I'm going to show you a common problem that happens, especially at the beginning of BI projects, where you're trying to define your dimensions and the client has given you different tables to set up your dimensions by. Inevitably, there are duplicates in those tables for all sorts of reasons. But anyways, I'm going to emulate a table that has duplicates in it, and then we're going to go through how to use a recursive common table expression in a view to correct this, or at least get you to the next step where you can go ahead and show this to your clients so that they can decide what values they want to use and which ones they want to discard. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is go into SQL Server and create a table. I already created a table called dim president to keep it really simple. Actually, here's a create statement here. So what I'm going to do is just populate these dim statements with 7 different presidents. And I'm also populating them with different names that might be, many of them are just bogus names I've made up. But anyways, they're all different names for the same president. Okay, so let's just run through that. Don't be offended by any of the names, please. Okay, so I executed, and now we're just going to take a quick look at those names. So when we select, we see we have President George Washington, John Adams, Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, Abraham Lincoln, Ronald Reagan. Then we have some nicknames: GW for George Washington, J-Man for John Adams, Obama for Obama, Silly Willy for Bill Clinton, Shorty for Abraham Lincoln. Like I say, they're not very good names, but anyways, they're just something I made up, some of these things. So anyways, and John Kennedy is one, but I didn't put any extra names for him, okay? Not for any particular reason, but I needed one that didn't have any other names in it. Okay, so basically, the ID here is repeated. So George Washington's ID 1, you see his GW is a 1, Georgie's a 1, and King George is a 1, okay? So their IDs are the same, so which is going to cause duplicates when we bring it over the cube in the dimension, and they have different names. So let's just go over to the cube and see how this works. So basically, I've created a view called view vdim president, and I just bring in the ID and name, and they call the name president. Okay, so I have that particular view. We go over to the cube, and I already set up a dimension for it. So we have our vdim president here. So if I want to look at the data, I can see that data that I had created right over here. All right, and so then I pulled in the ID and the president name, right? So let's go ahead and process this dimension and see what happens. So we process. I click the process button, say yes, say full, and I run it, and lo and behold, we have an error. Okay, and the error is, what is the error going to be? It's going to duplicate, right? There's our duplicate attribute key. We knew that was coming, right? Because we had all those, like George had 4 different duplicate keys of 1, right? So if I just pulled that out and looked at it over in a notepad, I would see that it would say column ID value 1 attribute. There's a duplicate attribute key. No big deal. We understand that, but it is a big deal because we can't process a cube, right? So I could go about this by taking the first ID that we come to each time, but then how do we show our users all of the names that they had given these guys in their table, and you know, and I want to be able to present that back to them so they can pick which name they want to use, not just the first one that I pull out. Okay, so what I've done is I changed my view. Okay, so I'm gonna close this up, and I changed my view. Let's go back to the SQL Server, and I went over here and I altered the view. Using a common table expression, actually a recursive common table expression. So if I run this code, which is the new way I've done it, I will see that I have concatenated. I have found all the IDs that match each other, the duplicates. Then I took the name and I concatenated them together, as you see here. So George Washington, George. So now this will pass the duplicate test. Okay, over in when I use this same view, which I altered, over inside of the cube. So let's just go back over the cube. Let's see how that looks. Okay, so I come back to the cube. Let's just take a look now at what our table looks like. And now you're going to see it's pulling from the new view, and that is going to give us only the 7 IDs that are all unique. So I think this is going to pass the smell test. It's going to pass the process test. When we show it to our users, they can say, oh, okay, I want it to be George Washington, John Adams, and Sir Bill, and Ronnie, and John F. Kennedy. That's how I want it to set to. Who knows? So anyways, this is what that's for. So now we can pass the test, we can get our cube going, our prototype going, and we also don't lose any information that the users have used before. So let's process that. Do a full build. Come over and run. And it failed. Okay, why did it fail? All right, let's look at the error message. And so it says something about errors in the backend database access module. The size specified for the binding was too small. Okay, so that means, this would mean something with the size. So what happened? We increased the size of that president's name, right? So when we first brought it in, it was only one, it was just like 25 characters. But now, because we concatenated it, it might be 125 characters at the most, right? So if we go back in and we look at president here, that column, and go to the key, which is set for key and name at the same time. So I come back in here, I look at the key, and lo and behold, the data size is only 25. That's why we're getting this size problem. So let's just create this and just throw in 300 just to make sure we cover it. And let's reprocess, see what happens now. I ran it, it succeeded. I close, come back over, go to my browser for that dimension, take a look at the browser, and lo and behold, here's all our, let's just make sure it's right, reconnect, there's each of our president's names. Okay. All right. So now I'm in business. I can still continue to build in the cube. I can get my prototype out, and I can show my users, and then we can discuss what names they really want to use for each of the presidents. Okay. Well, let's take a look at this code of this recursive CTE I'm using here, and try to explain it a little bit. Basically, I have 2 CTEs here. This one here is called the temp recursive. Okay, that's a recursive CTE, and that is defined as this piece right here. Okay, and the first one, the first CTE, I just have a temp. Basically, in this CTA, I'm getting a row number I'm going to use later. Okay, so if we looked at this, what the output of this CTE is, it's basically numbering them in order, in some sort of order by name. Okay, order by name, so alphabetical. And you see the row number 1, 2, 3, 4 for George. It's partitioned by ID, so then it starts over again for John Adams, 1, 2, 3, 4. Obama, so we get 1, 2, 3, 4 for Obama. Clinton, we get 3. 1, 2, 3. Then it goes to Abraham Lincoln. Okay, so that's how this piece works. So this is, remember, the CT is a lot like a temporary table. Very temporary. It doesn't last very long. It just lasts for the duration of the query. So then that's the normal, regular old CTE. Then you have your temp recursive CTE. Okay. Then you have your temp recursive CTE here. So what this does is it starts with the CTE here, and this is what they call the anchor. then you union all. It recalls back to itself with the ID and with these parameters. So then it loops. It loops. So this CTE basically builds out one at a time each row. All right. Okay. So to see how that works, I'm going to uncomment this little piece out because this is not as easy to see. So now I'm going to run it. And so after it gets the row numbers, it comes back in here and as you see, George Washington comes in first. Then you're going to see on its second iteration, George Washington, let's see. You'll see George Washington down here. Here's his second iteration. See row number 2. And where's George Washington and Georgia. Then the third iteration, okay, as it goes through its recursive nature, is 3, and then the fourth one, right? So that's how that output works. So then, since I'm obviously, this is even worse than before, right? But in a way it's not. All I have to do is take the max of any one of these, the ID, because they're all iterations. They keep on building, and whatever the max is going to be the longest one, and that's the one that's going to come back, and that's the one I want. Okay, so what happens here is instead of, I already have this data inside the recursive CTE. I just did the select here to show that to you. So I comment that out. What I actually do is take that data, this data here, I do an ID, I group by ID. Maybe this is a little easier to see if I do format the list a little bit. So here I group by ID, right? And I take the max president name, right? So the max is the longest one. So this one will come back. This one will not come back. This one will not come back because I'm grouping by the ID, right? So actually, if I had done this when I was demonstrating to you, okay, before, so let's just run that again so we get a little bit better viewpoint of it. So see, my IDs are all together here. My George Washington, here's the different iterations as it built out through the recursive query. And so what I'm doing now, when I rerun this thing and I comment this out, right, and I use this ID max and group by ID, I'm going to group by ID, so I'm going to group this one. I'm going to take the max president, and the max is going to be the longest one, right? And then I'm going to do the same with these other guys for each one of those, and that's how I'm going to get my result set. Okay, so now I run this again. After commenting that piece out, like I say, I just put that little piece in just so we can, just to help understand what this is doing. And there's my result set, and that's what I pump into the view, and that's what the view pumps into the cube dimension when we build it. Thank you.